Okay, let's let's get going. All right, so first thing is the exams are graded, but I'm not going to return it because there's a couple people that have yet to take the exam, so I'll return it next time. However, if you look on La Lima in Postum, it'll show what you got on the exam, so you can figure out what your score is because that'll be posted. But I'm going to return it next time. Okay, and then also in terms of Lab 8, if you look in Postum, if you turned it in, I gave you credit for it. If you didn't, then you get 0, but you can turn it in, and as long as you turn it in by the end of this week, then it'll be no late penalty, so you can still get Lab 8 in. Okay, so any questions about that? Okay, so let's go to the daily work folder on resources. I'm going to open up that HTML file. And important announcement, we have our binder check next time. Okay, so that means you put your materials for this course in a 3-ring binder. You should separate it out into sections. So those index tab type stuff, that's the easiest way to separate it into sections. It should be in order. You need to have handouts, and that would mainly be for the labs themselves, because there was some of the earlier ones we had handouts. Then the labs, your actual labs, your projects, exams, keep those all separate, put them in chronological order. If you forget to bring it in next time, or you don't have it ready next time, the day of the final you can still turn in show me your binder. Okay, when you bring it next time, I'll look at it. If it looks good, then I just mark it as this is fine, and then that's it with respect to that. Binder is 5% of your grade, so make sure you get it done, because that's a big part at this point. Okay, also, and I'll remind you folks of this again next time, you should have received an email notice that course evaluations, so there's a course evaluation system, CES. It used to be a different name, but they have a new system. You should have received a notice for that, and not just for this course, but all of your courses. So they will close that, in other words, your opportunity to enter an evaluation for any of your courses by the last day of instruction, midnight, usually they do it. So you should go ahead and do that before then. For this course, if 80% of the people in the course participate in that, because it'll let me know how many people are participating. It won't show me the results, but it'll let me know how many people participated. If 80% participate, then that's an extra 5% that gets added on to your grade. If less than 80% participate, then it just doesn't count, which means that in the final postum, when it shows your scores, the percent of the score completed will be 95% instead of 100%. So it doesn't hurt, but it does help if at least 80% participate in it. It's short. Okay, so if you saw what it looked like last semester, there's I think maybe 7 questions on it, so it's very quick to complete. So I highly recommend that you do that soon, so that if at least 80% of people in the class participate, then you get an extra 5% tacked on. Okay, so binder check, that's 5%. That's not optional. You have to do that. Okay, so make sure that you take care of business. Okay, so between now and next Monday, get those stuff together. Okay, just get all your completed assignments and put together that into a 3-ring binder, and then put it in order, separate out the different things, and then it should be fine. Okay. Okay, so what we're gonna do, we got two more, yeah.
What order is it going in?
It doesn't matter, but separate the labs, the projects and exams. So if you put in any order for those three, I don't care, but chronological order, so it should show lab one, then lab two, lab three, and so forth. Okay, any other questions with respect to the binder? Okay, so we have two more labs and the project. Hopefully for the project, you've been writing down things so that your setup, you got that pretty much all handled correctly at this point. Okay, but we got two labs, Lab 9 and Lab 10, actually contain things which are related to completing the project. So we're going to look at Lab 9, and it is sort of going to be it should be relatively quick because it's a review essentially of things that we already did for Project 3, or you should have basically completed for Project 3. So let me just open that in another window. Okay, so first thing you want to do is download lab9.zip. Okay, so we come here, we're going to get lab9.zip. So let me move here into resources and then labs. And lab 9, and then there's a compressed file, so I'm going to go save link as, and I'm going to put it on my desktop. Okay. And then what we're going to do is we're going to create a couple of folders in the main Docker folder inside of docs. So let's go and do that right now. Okay, those of you that walked in a little later, the exams are graded, but I'm not returning it today because there are a couple people that have yet to take the exam. If you look and post them, you can see what score you got. Okay, also Lab 8, if you didn't turn it in so far, it'll show a 0 there, but you can turn it in to the end of this week and it's no late penalty. Okay, so make sure you get that in. Okay, so okay, I'm going to Documents, Docker, and here's the main Docker folder. Okay, so inside of Docs, we want to do a couple of things. First of all, inside of cent280, which is where we have our web page type stuff, inside of cent280, I'm going to create a folder called Lab 9. Oops. So inside of cent280, inside of docs, create Lab 9. Then inside of docs, in the include folder, where right now we have only Project 3, again create a new folder called Lab 9. So Lab 9 and then even Lab 10 are going to be similar to what you have to do for the project. Okay, so even though we'll work on Lab 9 and we'll go back to the project, it's definitely worth it for you to look at Lab 10, because the last part of the PHP scripts that you have to do for the handle, edit, request, okay, that part is very similar to Lab 10. Okay, so it's worth it to look at that today. In fact, while I'm here, I'm going to, let me think. Well, actually, no. Those are the folders I need, because even for Lab 10, we're going to use the Lab 9 folders. So inside of include, I have Lab 9. Inside of cent280, I also have a Lab 9. Then I'm going to go to the desktop, and I'm going to uncompress this. So I'm going to extract the files here. Okay. And then it creates this folder Lab 9. Okay, so I just extracted that with 7-zip. So the first thing I want to do, or the next thing I want to do, is open this up. Okay, and inside of there is docs. And inside of docs, there's cent280. So I go to cent280 and then I open up lab 9 and then we have these 3 PHP files. So what you want to do, I'm selecting all of them, I'm going to copy them. Then I go to my main Docker folder and I'm going to paste them into here. Okay, so the PHP scripts go inside the lab 9 folder, which is inside of cent280, which is inside of docs in the main Docker folder. Okay, so cent280 is the web document root. That's the one that gets mapped to the web document root. So you know you need to be inside cent280 for the PHP scripts. And so I put it inside of a folder called lab 9 so it doesn't get mixed up with the project 3 PHP scripts, right? It's in its own folder. Then what I'm going to do is go back up to the desktop. Open my lab 9 folder, docs, go into the include folder, and then lab 9, and then we have those files there. Okay, so I'm going to copy all of those files. And then go back to the main Docker area, go into include lab 9, and then paste those files in there. Okay, so the SQL scripts and the PHP script that's used to connect a PHP file to the backend database, lab9_db, we gotta create that. Those should be inside of the lab 9 folder inside of include. So the setup is very similar to the way that we set up project 3. When you're describing for project 3 to set up for the project, you're going to have stuff in a compressed file, right? That's you upload to Laulima. So when you start to describe things, the things that we just did right here, that's one of the kind of things that you should describe. I need to copy these files from here into this folder on your computer system. Okay, so with respect to the main Docker folder. Okay, all right. So I accomplished this step here. Okay, where I made those files, and then I copied the files. I skipped step 3 temporarily, but let's go back and do that. Okay, so I created those directories, and I copied the files. So I did step 4. Okay, so step 3, I need to use the cent280 man user, create lab9db owned by Bob. Okay, and then actually I should have said go into the Docker Postgres SQL container first before creating that database, because obviously we have to do that. Okay, so I'm going to open up a ConEMU terminal. I'm going to set the Docker machine environment variables. And then pipe it into IEX. Okay, and there's a good chance I'll want more than one terminal open, so why don't I go ahead and open a second one. You can do the same thing. Okay, and in both ConEMU terminals, I'm going to change into the main Docker folder, and then I'm going to start up the Docker containers. And then I'm going to go into the Postgres SQL container so I can create the database that's needed for Lab 9. Okay. Okay, so that's what I'm doing there. I'm going to get into the Postgres SQL container, and get a root prompt. And I'm gonna just go into the Lab 9 directory inside of include, so later on when I include the init.sql and other files like that, then I'm in the right location. To do the first step, which is just to create the database. You don't need to be in this directory to create the database. But I'll just move there because I'm going to want to be in there eventually. Okay, so I log in as the super user, pgsql_man. Oops. Okay, and then I just create a database called lab9_db, and I make the owner of that database Bob. So the database is created. I need to quit out of there. And I'm going to connect to the database again as Bob. Okay, and now what I can do is I can load those two scripts. Okay, so going back to the web page that describes this, what we want to do is include init.sql and add initdata.sql. Okay, so let me go to the terminal and do that. Okay, so init.sql. Okay, so I've created some tables and a view there, and then /I add initdata.sql. Okay, so for some reason I just put add initdata instead of add initial data. That's a name. But if you just go /I and you type add and you hit a tab, then it'll fill in the rest of it. And then so we have data now stored inside of the database. And what that does is it added in some customers and it added in some cars, and the web application itself is to allow making sales. So you say this customer bought this car. That's basically what the web application is going to be doing. Okay, so what we want to do next, so we've done these things, got the file uncompressed. We created those folders, copied those in, created the Lab 9 database. Okay, get into this, then include these scripts. I should have said include it as Bob. Okay, not as super user. So just after you create the database, log out of it, log back in as Bob, and then include the init.sql and add initdata.sql. Okay, and then what we need to do is we're going to create the following file in Genie. Okay, so let me go ahead and do that. So I'm going to start up Genie. And I'm going to highlight this right here and copy it. And I'm going to paste it here. And then when I save it, I want to save it inside of the Lab 9 folder that's inside of the include folder. Okay, so Docker, main Docker folder, docs, include Lab 9, and then I'm going to call this insert funcs.sql. Okay, so you just copy and paste it. And if you look at it, it's actually very straightforward. It's just you insert the function insert sale, you need the customer ID and you need the car ID, and then that'll store that into the sales table. Okay, so it's a pretty straightforward PLPG SQL function, because if you pass the customer ID and the car ID, then I guess, let me move this on to the next line. Okay, just so it's a little easier to see. In fact, even this. Okay, that's easier to see. All right, you don't have to do that, but I just so that it's easier for me to talk about. So this is just a very straight insert query into this. Okay, we're gonna store stuff in the customer ID and the car ID. You could open init.sql so that you can see what's inside of those tables that we already created there. Okay, it uses the sales view basically, so the home.php is going to make use of this in order to display when we have sales. All right. So that file that I just created, insertfuncs.sql, right? So if let me go into the Postgres SQL container here. Okay, and this insertfuncs.sql, that's a file that I just created in Genie. You just copy and paste. All right, so coming back into this, if I go /i insertfuncs.sql, then I have that ability to insert a sale. Okay, the insert sale function has been added. Okay, and that's we're pretty close to being able to work on the PHP scripts to basically get Lab 9 done. Okay, so taking a look back here, we got this in. We save as insertfuncs.sql. Okay, inside the Lab 9 folder, which is inside of include, right? Your SQL scripts go in the include side, not the cent280 side. Okay, now we need to fix the IP address for the host inside the main Docker folder, docs folder include, then lab9, lab9.php. We need to fix that. Okay, so I'm going to go to Genie, and what I want to do is go open lab9.php, and this thing was set up when I created it was on my Linux machine, so the host was just localhost, but that's not correct. So we need to set the correct IP address for the host. So let's review how we do that. Okay, and let me exit out of this temporarily. Okay, so Docker network ls. So we list the networks because I want to give this ID. So mine is 280.6F3. Okay, so Docker network inspect, and it's 280.6F3, or at least that's what mine is. Then I'm going to pipe this to group regular expression, so I can search for the line that says gateway, and mine is 172.19.0.1. for project 3, you should have explanations like this, right, in the setup, because that's important. So I need to change this to match that address. Okay. The database name is correct, the username and password are correct. So I should be able to connect now using my PHP scripts. Okay, so very similar to the setup for project 3, right? So hopefully you've been taking notes all along and you know how to write that down for the setup. Okay, now the other thing that we could take a look at, of course, is the IP address for the web server. And we can get that by just typing Docker machine IP my Docker. So if I go on my machine to 192.168.80.131:8080/lab9, I should be able to get to my lab9 folder. Okay, so I'm going to open up Google Chrome and get there. Okay, and this doesn't have an index.php, so you can do directory browsing. And we're going to start off by going to home.php, and then we want to basically be able to add a sale. Okay, so if I click on home.php, you should reach this. If you didn't reach this, that could be because you didn't set the IP address correctly, okay, for the PostgreSQL database. Okay, so I remember I changed mine here so that it matches the IP address for the gateway in our network. Okay, and as a result, I can get to this part right here. Okay, so what I need to do, the last step is modify handle add sale.php so that the sale is added. All right, so let's go ahead and do this. Okay, so I'm going to open a file, but it's not in the right directory. I got to look inside the part that's underneath cent280. So I'm going to go to docs, cent280, and then lab9. Okay, and I'm going to look at handle add sale.php. Okay, so right now, what this script does is very simple. It takes the values passed via post, and it's doesn't do anything with them yet. What we need to do with it is basically perform the steps so that it doesn't insert into the sales table. All right, so let's let me open up addsale.php. Okay. This basically is an HTML form. I'm going to check to make sure that the names that are used, okay, one is car ID and then the other one is cust ID, like this. So I want to check, and that in fact is the correct names that I have here. So that's the only reason why I wanted to look at that. The details of this are not super important. The important part is that the name for this select box or select list is cust ID, and the name for this select element is car_ID. So that's the two names that we have here. Okay, so I was just double checking, making sure that we don't have any problems with this. What you can do, here I'm going to my second shell here, This one here is connected to the database. I want to leave that connected to the database. This one I'm going to go into the PHP Apache side, so at least I can check for syntax errors, because anytime I modify the PHP script, I want to check for syntax errors. So let me go ahead and do that here. Okay, so Docker compose. I'm going to execute a command in the PHP Apache container, and we're going to execute bash, so we get a root prompt there. Okay, and when it starts up, we're in the web root, okay, or the document root right here. So I'm gonna change into lab 9. Okay, and there's my files, yeah, home.php, add sale, and handle, add sale.php. If I just do php-l, handle, add sale.php, there's no syntax errors. So it starts off with no errors inside of it, but let's look at what we need to do. Okay, so what we need to do is use this connect function so I can connect to the backend database. Okay, so that's what we're going to do here. Okay, so first step, I go $PDO is the result of calling connect. And what we'll say is if not $PDO, so we don't get a connection, then we're going to say die and okay, I'm just changing my indent width. It's not super important, but I'm just going to do that. Okay, so we'll say die could not connect. Okay, so I made some changes. So I go back to my terminal where I can run the lint command on this and check if I have any syntax errors. And I don't have any syntax errors. If I actually try to run it, then I don't get a message could not connect, right? So, and because I don't get a message could not connect, then I've shown that I actually am connected. Okay, so this is working up until that point. Okay, so now I got these two values, and what I want to do is come up with an SQL statement, okay, where we're going to be able to insert a sale. So I look at my insert funcs.sql, and the name of the function to insert a sale is insert sale, and what I have to pass is the customer ID, then the car ID. All right, so I come back to this and I say SQL equals select insert sale. Okay, so I go back, I double check, insert underscore sale, then customer ID, and then car ID. Okay, so then I'll put two placeholder variables, cust ID for customer ID, and car ID okay, for my SQL statement. Okay, so again, I'm going to double check, I'm going to go back. The order I have it here is cust ID, customer ID, then car ID. Yeah, customer ID first, car ID second. All right, so I verified that. I save this. I go back to this terminal, and then I check for syntax errors. Don't have syntax errors. Okay, I'm going to continue. All right. So now what I want to do is create my statement, because we're going to do a prepare execute statement. So let's do the prepare part. Okay, so dollar statement equals $PDO prepare $SQL. Okay, and again, this is the kind of thing that was done for handling add requests if you look at the PHP script for your project 3. And then what we need to do is create an empty array, and then set two values in that array. Okay, so the first one is the placeholder variable, cust ID, and the value that we're going to store in there is the value that's passed via post. Okay, so that's one of the two values. Let's get the other one. The placeholder variable for the car ID is :car ID. Let me get that spelled correct. And the value is going to be the value for car ID passed via post. Okay, so I'm pretty close to getting it fully set up. In fact, that's set up now. I just need to run it. Okay, so $statement, execute, and then I need to pass it the array so that the values get passed there. What happens is that those values then get plugged into this SQL statement and then it executes it. But when it does that, when it plugs it in, it will filter the data. So if you had somebody was trying to launch a SQL injection attack, and it was values that got passed here via post that had things that were SQL injection type values, this would clean it up. Okay, now, it wouldn't be actual, you couldn't do an SQL attack if you look at the add sale, because it's using select lists, and then so the user doesn't have a text box to enter anything in. They can just choose something off of the list. So that's generally not a problem. Now, after we execute this, then what we want to do is use the header function and drop back to home.php. Anytime you use the header function in a PHP script, the next line should exit, because you're saying redirect to another page. You don't want it to run any more code that's on the PHP script that you're on. Now in this case, it's at the end of the script anyway, so it's redundant to put an exit, but it's always just a good idea. Now, what this means, what we need to do, is check for syntax errors. Okay. We don't want to do PHP-F because when I'm running it from the command line, no values are being passed via post. But I can at least check for syntax errors. Okay, and since I don't have any, and I've gotten in all the pieces, so let's identify those pieces, okay, because whether you're doing an insert query or an update query, the basic things that you have to put in place, this script does that. Okay, so let's review that. So this is to help you to complete project 3 as well. Okay, you get a connection to the backend database. If you can't connect, then you quit. Okay, but if you do connect, if you have values you have to get that are passed via post, this is how you get them. Okay, then you form an SQL statement, and what you do is, in this case, because I defined an insert sale function to help me out a little bit, right, then I put select insert sale. If I did not have such a function, my SQL would look more like insert into sales, and then parentheses around the two field names, then values, and then placeholders basically for the values for the customer ID and the car ID. Okay. But by using a PLPG-SQL function, this is highly simplified, because all I have to do is call insert sale and pass customer ID and car ID, right? So I don't have to make my SQL look like these lines right there, like this, okay? And so that's why we use the PLPG-SQL function if it's available to us. Okay, then after you prepare the statement, so the initial part of the prepare and execute, then you set up the values that are going to be plugged into that statement when it's executed. After it's executed, we redirect to home.php. So if you add in a sale, it should indicate that the sale shows up like this. Okay, so that's the basic idea. I'm going to go back to Chrome, right? I'm going to click on add sale. This is going to bring up addsale.php. Okay, and so I need to choose a customer. So let's say I want to say that Bill Gates is going to buy something, and Bill Gates, let's say Bill Gates buys a Honda Accord. When I click on submit, it's going to call handle add sale. It's going to pass the ID values from these two drop-down lists. Okay, in fact, while we're at it, let me type Control U here and blow this up bigger so that you can see what's going on in these select lists. So the first select list that has a name, the post name of cust ID. Okay, for Jane Doe, the value is 2. No, sorry. No, I got them mixed up. Okay, for Jane Doe, the value is 1. For John Doe, the value is 2. For Bill Gates, the value is 3. And if you look at the cars, okay, then for the Toyota Corolla, that's a 1. For the Toyota Camry, that's a 2. For the Honda Accord, that's a 3. And for the Honda Civic, that's 4. Okay, so those are what get passed depending on what you select in the select list to the handling script. Okay, so those values are going to get passed. If I click submit now, okay, the user doesn't care what the ID values are. They don't need to see those values. What they see are the information that you need to see. Which customer, which car, right? So if I hit submit and everything works, then this table gets updated and it shows that Bill Gates bought the Honda Accord. Okay? If I go add sale, and I say, well, let's make John Doe buy something. John Doe is going to buy this Honda Civic. Hit submit, and John Doe shows up with the Honda Civic. Okay? So to complete this lab, you need a screenshot of this once you get this working. And okay, what you want to do is you make a Word document, not LibreOffice Writer, Word document, shows contents of your handle add sale. Okay, so basically this script right here, okay, and then include a screenshot that shows that you are actually able to add in a couple of cars, right? Because if you can do this, then everything must be working correctly. Okay, so in your Word document, screenshot of this, plus this code right here. Okay, and again, this general pattern is the stuff that you're going to also employ to complete project 3. The difference would be is that when you have to do handle edit request, not handle add request, but the difference is going to be the name of the PLPGSQL function you use to handle an update, right? So that's a basic thing that you need to be concerned with, and then that's what you essentially want to work on. Okay, so this is actually a really important script. Okay, the concept behind it, okay, you need to make sure you understand. Okay, you set up your SQL so that what it's going to do is call the PLPGSQL function that carries out the process that you want to have carried out. Okay? So in this case, it's just to insert a sale, or to add a sale, whatever you name that function. Okay, then look at that function definition, make sure that you are passing it the right set of things. Prepare a statement. You set up your array so that it's holding all the correct values you need to execute the statement. Then you execute it, and then you just redirect back to the home page. That's essentially what needs to happen in order for this to work. Okay, so you need this script, and then a screenshot showing that you're able to add stuff, and then that's it for Lab 9. Okay, so Lab 9 is not long. As long as you get everything put in the right place, and that's good practice because those steps to set up Lab 9 are similar to the steps that you use to set up Project 3. And you need to write down the setup for that when you turn in project 3, so then that's good practice to go through it. So if you got through this and this is working, then what I would recommend that you do is look at the lab 10 file and then go through and see how, if you can get through those steps. I'm not gonna go into that right now, but try to go through that, that's good practice, and see if you can get that to work. And the way that it's going to, what's gonna happen is it does similar stuff to this, but what it does is instead of just having add sale, you can edit the sale. And then so, taking a look at lab, 10 is probably a good idea in this case. Okay, so I'm gonna leave that up there. I'm not gonna upload it to Laulima. I want you to go ahead and type it out and get it to work, because you're going to need to do something similar to that in order to complete project 3. Okay, so go ahead and work on it, and then then we'll return back to project 3 probably in about 15 minutes or so. Expand it and copy it from the correct folder. Yeah, so you need this and then that, that's fine. So that it's working. Yeah.
Oh, but there's two buildings, is there a way to, or is that?
You can, but not with the PHP scripts. So you go into the database, you can always delete one of the records. But you don't have to. I mean, you can if you want to, I don't care, because the screenshot shows it works, so that's the main thing. Okay.
Yeah, I know. Come sit back here.
Yeah, you can reach home.
Oh, dude, so I was.
And then at the end of that, I was math teacher classroom, and they were like, quizzes, all the quizzes. I was like, this is why I was so funny.
I love this one.
It's not orientation sensitive. You can if you want. Are you a syntax, yeah? They shouldn't be any syntax. So when you check in your database, you will select star. Basic 9, so. Okay, you will select star from stars. And then customers. Go back to how it is. Okay, then go back to where you were. Like candle. Candle at seal.
It's dollar sign state. You guys have to.
Yeah, where, you have more of the screenshot now.
Are you covering up?
Gotta be under action.
Probably missing.
Oh, okay. Your insert funds that is. Let's take a look at that. Okay, so in the database. Go to the left hand. Insert sale.
Add sale.
Parentheses, one comma one. No parentheses. You want to do that? Okay, we'll select start from sale. Okay, go back to the web page, you refresh home page.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, now it's.
Oh. No, we just added it in directly.
Yeah, you see that?
So go back to your.
Yeah, yeah, you see that, yeah. So you just need the actual, yeah, you need that screenshot of that.
Insert underscore.
You want us to print it?
Yeah.
Just like, oh, just like, you just have the selection statement.
Because that's where your home page is. Okay, you have a syntax error on that.
As far as I can tell.
Yeah, yeah, that one is.
Is it okay if I don't have the edits to have it? Do I have to have the
No, no,
It's fine.
as long as it has a code.
But there's nothing. Yeah, I don't know why, but errors. This is what happens.
What? Yeah.
My eyes.
Okay, so let us leave lab 9. And so I'm going to close all of these windows. And the reason for that is that I don't want it to get confused with the files for project 3. Okay, so we're going to return back to project 3. Before I leave this, I'm going to put project 3 here so that I return to this. Okay. Okay, so I can just come back to Chrome for that. But I want to return back to project 3. Okay, so I'm going to click on project3.html. Let's review some of these things so that you make sure you do everything that you need to do for a project. Okay. So you're going to need to modify handle login.php, home.php, choose request.php, handle edit request.php. We worked on handle login.php and home.php. I didn't complete it for all users and I didn't put in all the session data, but hopefully you already did that. Okay, so you're going to turn in all of these scripts. Okay, but the main ones that I'm looking at, of course, are the ones that you change. Okay, those are stuff that you already have done by now, certainly. Okay, this information should be in there, so hopefully you handled that part. Okay, project setup. So all along we've been talking about what you need to do to explain the things here. Okay, so make sure that you have already worked those things out. You know what to do. Completed PHP scripts, 35 points. Those 4 PHP scripts that you have to modify, that's where the 45 points are going to come from. And basically I'm going to test your application if it works. So I can add requests, I can view the proper request depending on who it is logged in, I can edit the request, then most likely you're going to get the full 35 points there. Okay, I'll look at your code, as long as it's done so that it should work, then it's fine. If something doesn't work, then I'll look at your scripts, depending upon what's wrong with it, you're going to lose points from the 35. All right, SQL scripts. Basically, okay, you include all those scripts. If your stuff is working correctly, your SQL scripts must be correct. Just make sure, right, that you upload all of these things inside of your zip file, which will have both your PHP scripts and then your SQL scripts inside of it. Don't forget to get a SQL Power Architect view of your database. And remember, for that to work, you got to have mobile Xterm loaded, right? And you got to export the display variable. Don't forget to answer these 2 things. 2 useful features that could be added to the application. This is a wide open question. There could be whatever you think that you would add to the application to make it better. So for example, you can add a request, you can edit a request, you can't delete a request. So if somebody said one of the 2 features they would add in is the ability to delete a request from an administrator point of view or whatever, or you could delete only your own requests or whatever, you just explain it. You don't have to put code, you don't have to show how you would implement that, you just need to explain what that additional feature would be, and then you need to answer these questions below. Okay, they're 5 points each, so make sure that you do a good job of explaining that. Okay, it's going to be due by next Wednesday by 10 p.m. So you want to be getting close to completing everything that you can even today. Okay, so let's then look at this. What I did here, part 1 and 2 are repeated from last time. So if you didn't do those things last time, those are the things that you should check. Okay, so where I want to start off with is actually in item 3, but let me just review number 1 and number 2. Okay, so let's go to these two shells. So here, I don't need to exit this. What I'm going to do is just change directory to project 3 so that I'm in the main area for all the project 3 PHP scripts. I want to be there so I can check for syntax errors, because if I'm going to modify stuff, I want to check for syntax errors. I also want to be there because if I'm going to use group regular expression to search for stuff, I have to do it inside the container because Windows doesn't have group regular expression, doesn't have grep. So I got to do grep inside the container. So that's one thing. So I'm inside my project 3 folder, inside of cent280, so that means my main PHP scripts, okay, which you can see, right? All the PHP scripts there. Okay, then here, this is connected to the Lab 9 DB database, but I want to be connected to the project 3 underscore DB database. So if I do this, \C, project 3 underscore DB, and type in some pass, then I'm connected to the project 3 DB. So I switched over. In Genie, I closed up everything because I don't want to be looking at, say, init.sql and it's for the wrong database, right? I want to clear everything out. Okay, so even if you're not done with Lab 9, temporarily clear everything out so that you don't run into trouble. One of the biggest problems I see people running into when they're having a hard to find error is they got too many windows open inside of Genie. Okay, so just open what you absolutely need to have, and that's a better way of doing things. Okay, so what we're supposed to do is make sure that the same session variables is used for the user's ID. So I go back to this terminal here, and I do grep, and I put session. Okay, in the last time the handout, I also had put this in there, this, but you don't have to put that. Just put grep session, and then for all files. And if you take a look at this, the thing that we're looking for is that in handle add request, we expected the session data for the user ID to be stored as user underscore ID, and I had it as ID. Okay, so change that, which means that initially in handle login.php, I need to store it as user underscore ID in order for that to work. Okay, and then you should be able to, at least for a department head user, you should be able to add in the request. Okay, that's where hopefully your stuff wound up last time. Now, when I just glance at this, I can tell something about handle login.php that's incomplete. Because if you look, right, it puts handle login.php and it shows it 3 times, but we have 4 values returned from the checked user function. You got to store all 4. So just by glancing at this, I know my handle login.php is not complete. Okay, and in home.php, where you're supposed to be getting hold of all the session variables, I only see 2 lines there, which means I got 2 more that I need to add in, right? Because there's 4 things that we need to store. So take a look at this. This is user ID, department name, user type. What is missing is div name, right? And from this one, I'm missing div name and user ID. Okay, so I can just glance at this and I can tell the state that I left my handle login and the home.php. And I left it that way because those are parts that I wanted you to complete. That's not the only things to complete. Let's talk about what we also have to do to complete those. So let's review that. Okay, so I'm going to go open, and what I'm going to do is go to the cent280 folder, then documents and Docker, go all the way to the top and then come down docs. Okay, I go into cent280 because these are PHP scripts. Okay, then I go into my project 3 folder, and I'm gonna open up handle login.php. Okay, so if I look at this, remember, these things that show up in red, they're comments, and some of the comments you have stuff left to do. Okay, so here, var_dump, that's a debugging statement, you could ignore that. But this one, set session variables, I set only 3 out of the 4 values, because if you look right here, it's going to return ID, department name, div name, and user type. And I'm storing, okay, the ID, the department name, user type, but I didn't store the div name. So you got to add in a line in order to do that. That will complete handle login.php, adding in one more. Okay, so I'm going to go open, and I'm going to open home.php. Okay, and in home.php, well, that's just the title, that's nothing. Get session variables. Remember I pointed to this a little earlier? I only got 2 out of the 4 session variables. Get all 4 of them. Okay, pretty straightforward to get them, just a couple lines. I need the div name and I need the user ID. Okay, then it says to handle the member and div head cases. What does that mean specifically? Some of you have already done this, so that's very good. But you're basically going to have an else if user type equals member, okay, and then you're going to set a new SQL statement for that. $SQL equals select star from request view where, that's going to be the same. What's going to be different is this part down here, right? And so you got to handle that for a member. And for the member, you got to look at their ID, okay, in order to complete that SQL. And the other one is div head. For div head, what you basically need to say is where the division name, so where division name matches whatever the div name is for that. So you got 2 more cases to handle here. You got to make sure you do that. Okay, let's scroll down a little further. Nothing else in red, so that means the rest of it is okay. Okay, so that's what needs to be changed. You got to have an else if and another else if for member, okay, and for user type equals member and user type equals div head. Those are the other 2 cases that you need to make sure that you get done. Okay, so let's look at choose request.php, because that's the 3rd out of the 4 files that you have to edit. Okay, so just glance at this, right? That's just a name, right? That comment, don't worry about that. Get session data stored by handle login.php. Handle login.php is supposed to store 4 session variables. So here you got to get all 4 session variables. Okay, so it'll look similar to what you're doing for home.php. Okay, so remind yourself of that, where it says get session variables in home.php, that's what you need to do here. Okay, the other thing you need to do is you gotta handle the member and the div head cases. So if you look at how it's set up, okay, look at how, the similarities to what was done inside of home.php. If user type is department head, make the SQL statement be select star from request view where, that's exactly the same, right? Department name is this. Okay, so that basically is very much the same as what you have in home.php. The other 2 cases, when you get home.php working, and that's what you should do next if you don't have that working, will be what you're going to be putting in here, right? So just keep that in mind. And then the rest of it is all good, right? There's nothing there that needs to be changed. So if you already got handle login.php working fully correctly and home.php working fully correctly, it is straightforward to complete choose request.php, because you're doing the same things here as you do inside of home.php. It's just that this stuff is going to be to help handle editing a request as opposed to adding a request. Okay, so that's a basic idea, right? So think this and home.php are very similar, the parts that you need to change. All right, so the only other file that you have to edit is handle edit request. So let me open that up. And then let's talk about this. Okay, so got our basic stuff. Run the update query, that's what you need to do. So let's start talking about what you need to do to complete this. 9, 9, 10, and 11, which is done for you, are getting the post variables, the variables that are being passed via post. And where it's coming from is the edit request script. The edit request script, you don't have to change that. You can open it up to take a look, but what you would see is that these are the names of the form variables in edit request.php that are being passed. So it's getting all those variables via post for you, okay? Those are the idea. Okay, so we got our connection, we got our post variables, okay, so then you start thinking back to lab 9, what do we have to do? We have to get an SQL statement, right, that we're going to use to prepare our statement. So how are you going to do that? It's going to be an update request. So if you create a function for updating it, which is a good idea, you're going to be calling that function and passing it the variables, right? These variables that you're setting up here. So a good way, okay, so once you get, right, you go $SQL is this. Then you go $statement equal $PDO prepare that $SQL, just like lab 9. Okay? Then you create an array. You set these 3 values in the array, and so you set the values for the placeholder text, then you execute it, and then you're done. Okay, that's a basic idea to handle editing the request. To make that as straightforward as possible, it's a good idea to create a file, updatefuncs.sql or something like that, that basically will update a request. Okay, so let me show you how you could do something like that. Okay, so here, let's do this first. I'm going to open, and I'm going to go into the include project 3, and then here's the insert funcs.sql, just so you can take a look at that. Okay, and if it's me, this many windows open is okay, so I don't have a big problem with that. But if you got too many windows open here, close the ones that you don't need to have open. Don't have any lab 9 or lab 10 if you start on and open the same time you're working on the project. Okay. All right, so if I pattern something after this, I could do it fine, right? I go new, but instead of saying insert funcs.sql, I'm going to call this update funcs.sql. Okay, and I got to remember to include this. And by the way, for your setup, if you create an all.sql, so it adds all the SQL scripts in the proper order, that will make it way easier for you when you write the directions for the setup, because you can say, create the database, as super user, add the PG crypto extension, as super user, get rid of all the extra PG crypto extension files by going /i drop.sql, right? Then the next step should be log out, log in as Bob, and go /i all.sql, and it runs all the rest of the SQL scripts in the proper order. That's the easiest way, right, to describe the setup as far as the database is concerned. So you should make an all.sql, and then we'll talk about that a little bit. Or you can figure it out, but we'll talk about that maybe next time. Okay, so what am I going to do? I'm going to say drop function if exists. Okay, I put this, and I'll just copy and paste it, but then I'm going to change this, right? So I'm going to say, let's call it update request. And in order to update a request, I need to know what actually goes inside of updating a request. So here, I do want to actually open init.sql, but you can see why I don't want to have the lab 9 init.sql open, because then I'm looking at the wrong thing, right? Okay, so for a request, okay, we're going to need the user ID, okay, the request text, and the cost. That's what goes into a request. So look at handle edit request. We got the request text, the cost, and the request ID. That's actually enough to update it. Because for the request, we're not changing the user's ID, right? You're not changing who the request belongs to. All you want to do is you want to change the text and the cost. But to do so, we need to know the ID for the request, right? So we need to know this ID, we need to know the text for the request, we need to know the cost. So we need those three things. Okay, so what that tells you is I'm going to need something like the request ID, right? Then I'm going to need some text, and then I'm going to need the price. And the cost is decimal 10,2. But you can just put decimal, that's good enough in the description there. Okay, then we'll say create function update request. Okay, so the first thing, the integer, is going to be the request ID. So I'm going to call this req underscore ID, and that's an integer. Okay, the next thing will be the request text, so req text, and that's text. And then what I need, underscore cost, and that's decimal. Okay, and you can put 10,2 if you want here. Okay, returns, doesn't need to return anything, so returns void as, and then you have this. Okay, so let me save this, and it's going to go in my project 3 folder inside of include, so I gotta select the right one. Okay, so then I go back, I double check on this, let's see, returns void, yep, looks like a similar kind of thing. Oh, I put numeric there, numeric, decimal, both of them work, doesn't really matter. If it were super important, I would go back and change it so that it's consistent. Okay, but numeric or decimal will basically handle it. Where there would be a slight differentiation is the way that it stores it, because decimal is exact and numeric, if you say numeric comma 2, then it rounds it off to the hundredths place, but it's not exact. Does that matter for our application? No, but in a real application, if it has to be an actual currency type stuff, then you would want to use decimal, not numeric. Okay, but that's okay. It'll still work, so this is fine. Okay, so what do you put into an update request? Well, if you're thinking of what we did recently, right, it's going to be, you got begin and end, right? It's always going to have that. Let's see. Yeah. Okay, begin and end, and then we got to do something. So how do I do an update query, right? I go update, and then I need to put the name of the table. What's the name of my table? Requests. Update requests, set. So what I want to do is I want to set the request text. Okay, so let's look at the name, request text. So I get the exact spelling because that has to be the field name. Equal to the past text. Okay, comma, right? Because I got to set two things. So then what I also want to set is the cost equal to the past cost, okay, where, right, so I set those two values, separate with a comma, where the ID, right, ID equals to the past ID. Okay? And then that's it. That's what it should look like. So that's basically a straight SQL update query. And so if you have something like this, this is the thing that you need to call in order to carry out the update. So in handle edit request, right, assuming I've uploaded update funcs.sql, okay, then, oh, in fact, you know what, I made a mistake here. Let me go back to this. This is a mistake. Let me quit out of this database. Okay, the reason why, look at my directory. I'm in the Lab 9 folder, right? No good. Okay, that's my project 3 directory now. I'm going to do an ls, and you can see update funcs.sql. I just saved that, so that's in there. So I got to make sure that I include that. Now, if you look at the SQL statement, you can start to think of what order these things have to be run in order to properly set up the database. This has to be first, init.sql. Well, actually, the auth funcs, update funcs, insert funcs, those could be done at any time. Okay? But of the other ones which affect the data, not functions, init.sql definitely has to go first. Before you call add users.sql, you got to put in auth funcs.sql because it depends on a function inside of there. Okay, so the proper order, you need to work that out so that it works correctly. Okay, so what I would do is, what I would suggest is start to make an all.sql and then try it out. And if it doesn't work, figure out what you need to change in the order or what you're missing, and then make sure that you add that in order to get it to work. Okay, but now I'm in the right directory. Okay, so I add that in, so I have update requests in there correctly. Now, let me do the following. I'm going to go select star from requests view. Okay, so I have some data in there, right? I already stored that using the application. So one thing that I could do, okay, let me do this first. I'm going to go \A to unalign the format. Then I'm going to run that select star from request view so it's easier to look at. So what I want to do is I want to test to see if my update request function works. So I'm going to do the following. We're going to go select update request. Okay. And if I look back at it, the first thing I need to do is basically set the request ID. So I'm going to put 1. That's the first request. 1. And what I'm going to do is the text for that is right now request 1 for Jane. So I'm going to change that, and then the cost right now is 100. I'm going to change that to 102. Okay. Then I hit enter, claims it updated it. So then let me run this again. It should be down at the bottom because it just got updated. And instead of saying request for Jane, it says request 1 for Jane Doe, and it changed the thing to 102. So my update request function, which I just called here, I verified that it works. Okay. Why do you do it here? Because you want to make sure it works here before you start messing with the PHP script, right? So let me just mention what you need to do here. When it says run the update query, I'm not gonna do this whole thing for you, but let me help you out a little bit, okay? A little bit. So $SQL equals select, and what is the name of my function? Update underscore request. Okay, what gets passed to that function? An integer, which is the request ID, then the request text, and then the cost. Okay, so here, my placeholder variables will be R underscore ID for request ID, okay, R underscore TXT for the request text, and then I'll put cost. Oops, sorry. Okay, and then that is what my SQL statement looks like. Okay, so I take my $PDO, I prepare the statement using this SQL, then it's setting up the values so they get plugged in, then executing the statement, and then that should do it. Okay, so this SQL is simplified because I have a PLPG SQL function named update underscore request, and I already tested that out, so I know that it works. So that instead of having to say stuff like this, right, update request, set this equal to this, comma, this equal to this, where this is this, all I have to do is have something that's as simple as this, right? Select update request, pass it the request ID, the request text, and the cost, the new cost, and then it'll update it for me. Okay, it carries that out. Okay, so what you try to do is get it so that this is as simple as possible. Calling update request is simpler than doing the actual update query for two reasons. Okay, one is the syntax is easier, less things to write down. Two, you can test update requests before you even write the PHP script, right? So it simplifies the process of getting this to work correctly. So that's the basic idea. This is not done, right? You know you need to do other stuff to complete it, but that's the basic idea behind it. Okay, so that's what you want to keep in mind. All right, so highly recommend you work on all.sql so that it puts everything in the correct order, okay, and you use that as part of your setup. All right, let me see here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is minimize this, and I'm going to minimize all of these things. Okay, so then I come back here, and in my main Docker folder, right, I have docs. So this is similar to what you're going to need to do when you turn the project in. You make a copy of this, okay, and I'm going to paste it here on my desktop. That's just a copy of the entire docs directory. Lots of files, because this is like the whole semester's worth of things. Okay, then I open this up, and I say, all I want to have for my project is cent280 and include. So all the rest of these things, I'm going to get rid of them. This is my copy now. This is not the main one inside the main Docker directory. This is my copy. So let me get rid of all of these things. Oh, what happened? Okay, so I'm just getting rid of all of this stuff. Okay, then inside of cent280, if this is project 3, then I don't need any of these other things in here. And I don't want any of those other things in there. Okay, then I go back up to docs, include, and there's just a lab 9 directory, so I'm going to get rid of that. So now my docs, what it contains is cent280, which has project 3, and docs contains include, which has project 3. Now I've cut it down to this, right? I've cut it down to what I would be turning in so that it has the correct PHP and SQL scripts. Okay, so I'm gonna compress this by going send to compress folder, okay, and it says docs.zip, and you could rename it after it saves it. So let me just rename mine, and I'll just put project3 underscore docs.zip. Okay, so you would turn in something like that when it's done. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do is in La Lima for resources and then today's date. So daily work and this folder, I'm going to upload that zip file. Where did I put it? Oh, here it is. Sorry. Okay. So I'm going to upload that so that the few changes that I made to mine, you could see those if you want to. It also has the update funcs.sql inside of the include folder, the project 3 folder inside of include, so you can get that. And remember, when you turn in your project, that's the kind of stuff you need to turn in. You upload PHP scripts, what happens? It gets wiped out. You won't get a good score if you do that, right? You get a very bad score. Also, here's some other kind of things you could do. So inside of the include directory, project 3, notice that I got make add users.py, make drop.py, users.txt. Those are not essential for the project to run because they were used to help create some of the SQL scripts. So you can get rid of them if you want. If you leave them there, it won't bother me. I'm just saying if you wanted to get rid of them, you could. Okay? Now, drop.sql is super important, right? You don't want to make the person running your stuff create drop.sql. That's why you don't need to put make drop.py in there. You just give them drop.sql and then ask them to run it, right? So, hey, and then what I highly, highly recommend is creating a SQL script called all.sql and then just put inside of it, just put \i. So here, I'll just show you, just so that you don't misunderstand what I'm saying. Okay, so in somewhere in here, I go new file. Okay, so what would I do? The first thing I would include is init.sql. Then I would include things like auth funcs.sql. Okay, this has to be done before add user. So you can bring in all the other function things, because those can come in. Okay, and then you add in, you could add in the view, that would be fine. Before you add in the users, you need to add in the initial data, add initial data.sql, because that puts in the divisions and the departments data. Okay, so two things have to happen before you put add users. This and also the add initial data.sql, because that puts in the divisions and the departments. Without those, you cannot add any users, right? Because a user belongs to a department belongs to a division. So the point is you just put this in the right order, so all the person on the end side has to do is go \i all.sql, it'll load them all in the correct order, and that's it, it's set up. right? As opposed to writing down directions, do this, then do this, then do this, then do this, put it all inside of all.sql. Okay, so this is incomplete. You try it out, you make sure that it works correctly. Okay, so when you look at it, make sure it inserts everything that you think it's supposed to insert. And then when you turn it in, include that in that same folder inside project 3, inside of include. Okay, and then that will minimize the effort to describe how to set up your project. Okay, any questions? Okay, you have an individual question. Okay, so that's what I'm gonna cover for today. So just keep working on yourself. Look at that pen if you have time.